The YouTube channel HiveMind plays a game on their channel called Guess That Rapper from the Type Beat. It's pretty self-explanatory, but they hear different type beats and have to guess which rapper the producer put in the title of the video. On one of their recent episodes, they heard a type beat that had a few signature production aspects that people associate with the Neptunes, the legendary 90s and 2000s duo made up of Pharrell Williams and Chad Hugo. You know the 4-bar count in, the doomp, 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 doomp. It might sound crazy what I'm about to say. Wavy synth lines, bouncy chords. Everybody playing the game, including the guest, Nassan, correctly guessed the artist in the title, but it wasn't Pharrell, or any of his frequent collaborators like Pusha T, Justin Timberlake, Usher, or Snoop Dogg. It was actually somebody who's never worked with Pharrell before, Lil Tecca. Yes, the same 16-year-old kid who in 2019 dropped Ransom, a much more of the times melodic rap song that, on top of just being catchy as hell, went viral for the clash between his nerdy appearance and aggressive lyrics that he admitted were not particularly autobiographical. But if you haven't been paying attention, and I mean, there's a lot going on, so I understand, he's built out a really impressive career since then, with well-sequenced albums full of transitions that have won him over a cult fanbase. Click on his most recent album, Dopamine, and you'll immediately hear why the HiveMind boys picked him for that answer. On Dark Thoughts, the synth stabs are immediately reminiscent of a Pharrell song like Frontin'. It even has Pharrell's trademark 4-bar count-in to start. While not every song on the album has that exact energy, there are a couple others scattered throughout the tracklist, including Irish Goodbye, and even a song like Hollywood I'd say is like borderline Pharrell inspired. But don't get the idea that Lil Tecca was the first guy to try to bring the Neptunes sound back. Countless artists over the past few years have been working within a scene to try to recapture that energy. And given how ubiquitous the Neptunes sound was back in the 2000s, it makes sense why they'd want to. Artists are pulling from the past for influence all the time. I mean, we've talked about it on this channel a bunch of times. But with this comes a lot of questions. What is it about the Neptunes sound that draws so many people to it? Is it just nostalgia, or is there real appreciation and craftsmanship involved? There's a fine line between influence and lazy trend hopping. Where do we draw it? Is there a point where a sound becomes so widespread that it's not just for one artist anymore and it kind of becomes its own genre? We're gonna get into all this, but first, if you like videos on music like this one, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe. I post a video every week. If you wanna see them early, go to my Instagram, HADJI, throw me a follow, and join my broadcast channel. I post all my videos in that channel one day early for free. Also wanted to say thanks to everyone who's checked out the video for my latest song, Gunk. Funny enough, some of the comments pointed out that I was definitely inspired by Pharrell and Chad's group NERD, and that's true, I do love NERD. If you wanna check it out, I'll put the link in the description. Let's get into it. This is the first and probably the only time on this channel that I'm going to cover an artist that already has a Lego movie biopic dedicated to them. So this is not going to be the most in-depth piece on Pharrell and the Neptunes that exists, but I'll give you, the overview. The Neptunes are made up of Pharrell Williams and Chad Hugo, who met in summer camp as two kids growing up in the Virginia Beach area. In 1991, while in high school, they won a talent show, which got them in the room with the legendary producer Teddy Riley. They got some placements, but their career wouldn't fully take off until the end of that decade. But trust me, when it rains, it pours. In 1998, they got their foot in the door with songs like Nori's Super Thug. In 2000, they landed a placement with Jay-Z on the track Give It To Me, which Pharrell is also on the hook for. And then, the floodgates started to open. There's an unconfirmed statistic that gets thrown around on the internet a lot that in 2003, 43% of the songs played on US Top 40 radio were produced by the Neptunes. Even if that number is off by a little bit or a lot, it certainly felt that way. So many of the biggest songs of that era came out of the minds of Pharrell and Chad. Snoop Dogg's Drop It Like It's Hot and Beautiful, Nelly's Hot in Here, Ludacris's Moneymaker. It wasn't just rap. Justin Timberlake's Rock Your Body, Usher's You Don't Have to Call, Khalees's Milkshake, Gwen Stefani's Hollaback Girl, Britney Spears' I'm a Slave For You. Outside of the smash hits, there were songs like Clips's Grindin' that had kids across the world banging on their lunch tables and freestyling. And not all of these songs sound the exact same, to be clear. Some of the Neptunes' biggest hits were anthemic. Percussion first, melody second, like Hollaback Girl, Drop It Like It's Hot, Moneymaker. The other side of their sound, which you get on Pharrell's solo track Frontin', or a song like Usher's You Don't Have to Call, is jazzier and melodic while still having some really interesting grooves in the percussion. Of course, outside of their big top 40 hits produced for other artists, the two were in NERD, a trio that pushed the boundaries of R&B, rock, and hip-hop fusion and went on to become a stated influence of artists like Tyler, the Creator. But there are a few identifiable components of production that, when all put together, create something that you would call Neptunesy. Probably the most iconic and immediately recognizable is the 4-bar count-in at the start of every song, or not every song, but a lot of them. Beyond that, many of the synth sounds that Chad and Pharrell would use during their heyday came from the Korg Triton, a workstation that now has a digital version or VST that anyone can download legally or otherwise. On the music theory side, they play with a lot of jazzier chords like 7ths, 9ths, and 11ths, and often mess around rhythm-wise with syncopation. For the non-musicians in the room, or even the musicians who just don't know the nerdy words, it's basically just, something like this. Look, this is a video essay, not a beat tutorial, so I won't get too nerdy with it and lose the people in the room. If you do want one of those beat tutorials though, there's tons of them on this platform, and honestly, even if you don't make music like that, I would recommend studying the Neptunes anyway because they taught me a lot about syncopation and chord theory. Before we dive into talking about like the Neptunes Revival, we should also be clear that just because people call it the Neptunes sound or upload Neptunes type beats doesn't mean that they were the only people in the 2000s making music like this. It's hard to have a conversation about this style of music without including Timbaland, who grew up with Pharrell and is actually distantly related to him. I know he's fallen out of favor with a lot of musicians because of the way he's embraced AI technology, but he was really that guy back in the 2000s. Take Justin Timberlake's Justified album, for example. The Neptunes did Rock Your Body, smash hit. One track before that, Timbo did Cry Me a River, another smash hit. On top of that, a personal favorite for me from a little bit later in the 2000s is Ryan Leslie, who was undoubtedly influenced by both the Neptunes and Timbaland. He produced the smash hit Me and You by Cassie, and also self-produced his own solo work. And when I listen to the production on songs like Diamond Girl, Addiction, and You're Not My Girl, it's like there's no way I'm not putting him in this conversation too. Also, he's responsible for one of my favorite videos on YouTube. But with those bases covered, let's look at the artists currently trying to employ some piece of the Neptune sound. It's hard to begin any conversation about the Neptunes Revival without starting at Tyler, the Creator. Right from the beginning of his career around the turn of the 2000s, he's been really vocal about how much Pharrell and the Neptunes inspired him. In an interview with Power 106 in 2013, he said it was hearing NERD songs on the radio that first drew him to the duo. You hear it a little in the production on his major label debut album 2011's Goblin, on songs like She, Her, and Analog. Where it really becomes evident is on the 2013 follow-up, Wolf. On that album, Jamba, Cowboy, Awkward, Party Isn't Over, Pigs, and Rusty all have some form of that signature 4-bar count-in. Funnily enough, Pharrell is on the album himself, singing on a track that doesn't have the count-in, IFHY. Their level of connection is deeper than just musical influence. I didn't have a father, I didn't have a big brother, I didn't have a big cousin, Tyler once told Rap Caviar, so as a kid, since 10 or 11, Pharrell is who I looked at. I hear the NERD influence heavily in his next album, Cherry Bomb, where Pharrell again is a vocalist on the track Keep the O's. The album overall is loud, the mixing is unconventional, and the response was divisive. It was probably his worst received album, besides Goblin, on Impact, but nowadays, all everybody talks about is how underrated it is. It was Pharrell himself who gave Tyler the advice to be more serious in his work, which led to 2017's Flower Boy taking his music to new heights, which he has since steadily built on without really too many hiccups. Now that Tyler is point blank one of the biggest artists on earth, he has a lot of sons. All of those artists are Neptunes inspired whether they identify as that or not, because they're just one step further down the family tree. It's the same way that I would say any artist who's like a child of Young Thug is then also a grandchild of Lil Wayne. So while this explains why a certain chunk of alternative hip hop and alternative R&B feels very Neptunesy today, under that Tyler branch, it's not the whole story. Because while Tyler's music, at least to me, feels particularly inspired by the weirder pockets of Pharrell and the Neptunes' music like NERD, plenty of younger artists today are trying to channel the energy of the top 40 songs that the Neptunes were responsible for. The call is coming from inside the house. In 2019, I dropped a song called Shirt, Shoes, Service. It's not on streaming services anymore because it was a part of an EP where I didn't really like the other songs on the EP and I had to take the whole thing down and I couldn't just take down individual songs. But I think the song's okay. If you listen to it, you'll hear just how Pharrell front and coded it is. Clearly, I should have stuck with that sound because Lil Tecca got a hit off of it. For what it's worth, in his interview with Billboard, he didn't credit Pharrell or the Neptunes as the inspiration for a song like Dark Thoughts. Instead, he said the sound was inspired by two of the radio stations in the 2002 video game Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Because the game is set in the 80s, all the music is period accurate, so the Neptunes were still in elementary school. But I guess when you take the sound of Lil Tecca and you add 80s influence, it comes out kinda Neptunesy. It's not just me and Hivemind saying that. There are plenty of conversations on the internet about how Neptunesy the new Lil Tecca songs are. My favorite Reddit thread that I found is from an old head, and I think the discussion is really wholesome. Musically though, to me it's plain as day, from the synth sound to the syncopation of the chord hits, but it's not a one-to-one copy. I think what he brings vocally is obviously very different than what an artist would have done in the 2000s, and even the lead synth in the chorus, the is very like plug and be and not necessarily super Neptunesy. It's fun to imagine what it would sound like if Lil Tecca went right to the source and hit up the Neptunes. And it's halfway possible because Pharrell just liked one of his Instagram posts. Unfortunately, it's only halfway possible because the Neptunes are no more. Both Pharrell and Chad are still active in the music industry to different levels. As recently as 2021, they produced a song together under the Neptunes name for Brent Faiyaz and Drake called Wasting Time. It sounds literally right out of the 2000s. It must have been before Drake bought Pharrell's chain and threatened to melt it down. The Neptunes also produced the 2020 SZA and Ty Dolla $ign song Hit Different. Hit Different. Hit Different. We were on the cusp of something incredible. Imagine all of these young artists trying to revive the sound while the originators were still out there producing on a high level. Unfortunately, Pharrell and Chad are now in a lawsuit over the Neptunes name and trademark. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell you who's in the right or who's in the wrong or what the deal is really, but it sure seems like the Neptunes as a duo is a thing of the past. Both of them are still making music separately. Chad has been working with artists like iDress and randomly has producer credits on Ye and Ty Dolla $ign's collab album Vultures 1. Pharrell just produced the latest Clips album, so, business as usual. And he's been tapped into this younger revival scene as well because he's been in the studio with the next artist we're going to talk about. Tommy Richmond burst onto the scene last year with the out-of-nowhere smash hit $1 Million Baby. I wouldn't call it a straight-up Neptunes song because the drums are more like modern trap drums and the pitch-down vocals are very Memphis. But the synth work, for sure, is definitely Neptunes coded. Tommy, like Pharrell and Chad, is from Virginia, and he's been calling Pharrell an inspiration in interviews since all the way back in 2022. The fact that he sings in a falsetto a lot also adds to the comparison because Pharrell does that all the time. The follow-up single, Devil Is a Lie, might be even more Neptunes coded with the minor chord, half step up, major chord production, which, for the non-music nerds, makes that dum 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 type of movement that you hear a lot in Pharrell's music. Tommy told Complex that the two of them have met and made some music together, so maybe one day we'll get to hear some of that. Either way, I feel like Tommy's music has enough deviation from the original sound that it doesn't really feel like he's participating in revivalism, just kind of like adding to the canon. But there are a lot of artists out there who are more traditional revivalists in that sense, doing as good of a job as they can of approximating the Neptunes sound. B, stylized 3-E-E, but pronounced B, is a pretty good example of that. They have a pretty big discography full of well-produced and well-written music that harkens back to that early solo career JT stuff that the Neptunes and Timbaland had a big hand in. Some of my personal favorites are Supersonics and Trendsetter. And I know it's good because I sent it to my girl and she likes it too. I even saw a comment on one of their recent reels where someone said they should go on tour with Lil Tecca. That's how you know a consciousness around this type of scene is forming. Another artist named Rasai Rasan is also adding to the canon and restoring the feeling. He used to make music that was more underground, modern SoundCloud rap, but within the last few years, he's really found his sound in that mid-2000s R&B tinged Neptunes Revival sound. You can still hear some of that bounce in songs like Describe It, but his voice has this like real je ne sais quoi to it that reminds me as much of someone from the mid-2000s like Lloyd as it does of like the JTs of the world. It hits me in a different nostalgic location, but it's one that honestly I feel like I might like even more. His song Treat You Right with the producer 808 Fly, who is one of the main backbones of the revival scene production-wise, is one of the best examples. But that song comes with a little controversy. A month or two ago, Rasai posted a TikTok accusing B of copying it. According to Rasai's timeline, B had reached out to him saying they should work on a song, albeit in a different style, New Jack Swing, just a week or two before B would pop out promoting a song called Over that sounded a lot like Treat You Right. I can't play long enough snippets of the two songs just for copyright reasons, but I'll link Rasai's original TikTok in the description so that you can go and form your own opinion. The songs are out there for people to make their own judgments. I couldn't do this video without talking about this, but also, from what I was able to gather, their teams are working on figuring this out. So hopefully this will end up with a solution that everybody involved is cool with. What I think the really interesting question here is, when a scene is already a revival of another sound, where do we draw the line on what's considered stealing from each other and what's considered just being inspired by the same source material? Neither B nor Rasai were the first people to put out like Neptunes Revival style tracks. Jay Safari's song Dance is a good example, and it got a little TikTok buzz back in 2022. And while B and Rasai were both putting out music back then, neither of them were putting out Neptune sounding stuff yet. The overall conversation has me wondering, given how popular this kind of music was back in the early 2000s, I feel like it was only a matter of time before someone like Lil Tecca, or you could argue Tommy Richmond, popped out and had a hit song that kind of revived that energy. It feels like maybe from Lil Tecca, the sound is now morphed into the underground rap world, because I just got a bunch of TikToks for this new Young Phazo song Damage that has super Neptunesy synths and a 4-bar count in. Sure enough, it was produced by LVUSM, or I guess like Love You So Much, I'm not really sure how to say that out loud, who also works with Rasai Rasan a lot. Vocally though, it feels like Fayzo approached it the way that he'd approach any other modern underground type rap song, like the kind of music that he normally makes. I could see these types of beats becoming pretty popular in the underground rap world. For me, I think the general level of musicality that it takes to recreate the Neptunes sound means that I'm cool with more artists doing the revival. It's good music to me. What the conversation really has me wondering is, at what point is this just its own genre or subgenre and not just like the sound of one artist? New Jack Swing is a genre that came up a little bit earlier, and funnily enough, the producer that many people consider to be the founder of that genre, Teddy Riley, is Pharrell's mentor. New Jack Swing is a mix of R&B and pop with hip-hop influence coming in kind of from the rhythm section, you know, usually in like drum machines or like chopped samples. It has a very particular style and sound. I think if you listen to Poison by Belle Biv DeVoe, gives you the idea. That girl is poison. You know what I'm saying? So maybe what we really need is a name for this Neptune style revival sound. Because to be honest, calling it the Neptune sound rubs me the wrong way a little bit because it feels like Timbaland erasure. I know everybody's mad at him because of the AI stuff, and I'm not just saying this because he said one of my songs was fire on TikTok before. Like, he's in that conversation, and you listen to some of these songs and they remind you of Justin Timberlake's My Love or The Way I Are with Carrie Hilson. Pharrell and Timbo are both from Virginia, so it makes me think you could call it something with Virginia in the name, but I think the unfortunate reality is a lot of people don't associate that when they hear it. Like the way that they would with New York drill or LA rap, a lot of that comes from what the vocalist is doing. And that's not really the producer's fault. Like at the end of the day, they're always getting screwed because their face is not necessarily on it. I think a lot of listeners would recognize the sound and the vibe and be like, ooh, that's that Justin Timberlake thing because they saw Justin Timberlake. And to be honest, producers are always kind of getting the short end of the stick when it comes to that kind of stuff. That's probably why they put tags on everything. Like in that first DJ Mustard era, like everybody knew what those beats sounded like, but he made sure you knew it was him with the "What's that on that beat?" Let's go. Like there's a reason for it. But I'm curious what you guys think more than anything. Is this a genre or a subgenre at least? And what would you call it? Let me know in the comments. And let me know what you want me to cover next. Peace.